To our last stop, Stop G on the architectural walking tour of Collingwood and Fitzroy. Let's go. This is an apartment building designed by Friedman White Architects, and I think it's a great way to end the tour because what we're going to discuss today are a lot of the tools and decisions that were discussed in Stop A, but you come up with two completely different proposals with two kind of similar briefs. And I think it's a really good example of how design is infinite and that there's something for everyone. Just like in Stop A, we're going to talk about the use of a datum line in this building, responding to context, but we're also going to branch into what do architects mean when they say rhythm and what do architects mean when they say the language of the street. Finally, I'm going to touch on something that almost every other project did not include, that this one does have. First thing that we noticed about this building is that it's using its neighbour's context to line up the overall bulk and form of the building. Also picked up on where the awnings were originally on their neighbour, but then on the other side it does end kind of abruptly. To deal with that, they've lined it up here so that there's a sort of coherency to the street. Next thing we're going to talk about is the use of a datum line. So very similarly to what we discussed in Stop A, which was an apartment building on a street filled with heritage facades and really eclectic shops, they used colour to make the ground plane disappear. What these guys have decided to do is use colour to make the sort of lower portion, podium level it's often called, pop out onto the street front. So they've taken a completely different approach where they've said, okay, well, Smith Street is this eclectic, crazy, busy street. Let's put the colour and the attention down on that ground plane where most people get to experience the building. And then the sort of height and bulk is pushed back and uses a more neutral colour to disappear in the sort of roof line. Another really key difference about this proposal and Stop A is the rhythm of the facade. See how they've used the columns to kind of like it has a rhythm to it, almost like you can almost hear train tracks. Rhythm is a word used in architecture to describe the sort of distance and separation of a repeating element. And the rhythm here, to me, is quite obviously picking up on its neighbours and this sort of pattern that goes along the street. Architects often call this the language of the street, if you're continuing on the language. And so if you ever see architecture writing in the wild, someone could possibly talk about this building by saying, the rhythm was based on the language of the street. And that would be a totally legitimate sentence in an architectural write-up to describe basically that there is a pattern that responds to the context of the street. A detail that I think is really lovely is how they've used the balcony railing almost every country around the world. There are really strict regulations on balustrade heights and window openings. If you were to have a window on that second story, you would only be allowed to open it by about this much. And it's really ineffective for cooling down a building. Having said that, if they had a balcony, it eats into indoor space. And in Melbourne, there's only a good couple of months per year you can be out on a balcony. It actually does make sense to have as much indoor space as possible. And then the decision to have a balcony right on the edge of that double sliding door means that you'd be able to open up your apartment and get sort of like at the height of a full window opening up because you've got the balustrade there to stop the fall risk. That shows that really well. So this door would be able to open all the way up as opposed to a window that can only open that far out. And they get to use all of that space internally. So it's a more efficient use of space in that sense. There's a lot of detailing in this and concrete work in this that I think would be really hard to build. I'm impressed that they managed to build it. Nothing sits flush. There's a lot of scalloping. And what that does is give the facade real depth. See the shadow where everything doesn't meet on the same plane. And that adds a lot of detail and energy to a facade, which really sits it in context to the busy facades of the neighbours. So this project only finished like under 6 months ago. And what we're yet to see, but exists in the renders, is all of this greenery. Now, this is the first building on this tour that has greenery as part of the architectural proposal. I studied architecture in Brisbane, and I have to say, moving to Melbourne, specifically Collingwood, I was shocked at the lack of greenery going into new developments. It's really wild to me that we are building any type of new building without a dedicated amount of space to landscape and gardening. It's not a trend. It's like a critical part of healing our planet. And if we need to build less building so that we can make room for more landscaping, that makes sense to me, and I cannot believe it is not mandated. There's no one party to blame for this. It's not just the developer, it's not a town planner, it's not an architect, it's not the builder. Everyone has to agree, align, and change our regulation framework so that we make these changes in our city. The thing you can do is get active with your local council. So write letters, say that we want more planting. Renaturing our cities is a bit of a buzzword, but I want to see this everywhere. I love the use of colour. I think a lot of our cities are way too bland, but there is already quite obvious signs that they're struggling to maintain this colour on a really highly trafficked street. Anything could be affecting this. It could have been the quality of the construction when it went up. It could be the type of product that was used. We don't really know. But I hope they get there, and I hope they can maintain it, because I really love the use. So that is our final stop, Stop G. A great way to end the tour, because it talks about a lot of the similar themes that we discussed all the way in Stop A, but has a completely different design proposal, which is what makes our cities interesting. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'll try and do a wrap-up vid with just the addresses that you can put into maps, so you can do this walking tour in real life. Tag me in it if you do it, and take some photos and look up and write to your councils about plants.